Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Ermenkov. I'm a ruling reality coach, and I'm continuing my series, Daily Reality with Alex. Today is 6th of July, 2023, and I'm continuing this series throughout 2023, where I'm explaining a lot of things about reality and how I personally am implementing those principles in my own personal reality. The important thing for me is when I go into exploration of reality is how I personally implement it in my life and why there are things that are working. And it's very important for all of us to know what exactly are we observing and to open ourselves away from delusion and to be willing and desiring to explore the raw reality as it is. Because delusion is when we decide that reality is what we think. I understand the idea that mindset and the mind is to control everything in reality. And we have heard that think and grow rich is a very important concept, but reality actually doesn't work like this. And it is made to be like this for a reason. And that's why I would like to speak today about the reality mechanics. And I'm immediately going to open my screen and share some images with you so that you can depict some ideas about reality. So the important thing is to see in and about reality as a very complex thing that has a lot of layers. If we only think that reality is constructed, let's say, by this plane where we know it very well and we think that this is everything that exists in reality, we are going to be 100% wrong about everything that is happening and all the movements that are going into reality. And that's why I decided to give you an example with a mechanical watch, though it's a very shortened allegory about what is happening. At least it is something that is explaining to us why there are so many moving parts. And let's say in a mechanical automobile, for example, it's more than 2,000 parts that are constantly in a movements and so on in order for something to work. We know that in a CPU, in a computer's microprocessors, there are now maybe close to billion transistor inside of this of it. And what is important to understand that first of all, we are looking in reality constructs about different layers. But then when we think about what is moving reality forward, we are to broaden ourselves and to move away from our comfortable ring and mechanics of what we already understand. And basically, we are more and more focused in reality if we go out of the details, out of the pictures that we have, and look non-biased upon what is happening. I understand that one of the big powers of the human being is to observe, but also once we go into the details of the observation, we are missing the big picture. And how big is the big picture? It is something that all of us can discuss for ages, but for sure, it is much more bigger than what we have been able to imagine. And what is important for me when we are going into the details, not to stay in one circle, for example, and to think that this is everything, but to broaden our vision. So in order to understand the reality mechanics, we are to broaden our vision. But what is more important is to answer this philosophical question Is there a predestination, or do we have a free choice? Because if reality is working in mechanics and everything is interconnected and we are part of this interconnection, and because of the circles and because of the cycles and because of the repetitions, there are a lot of rings in reality that are constantly working together. And once you start hearing about predictions that are very common about the human expectation and projections about the future, and we are constantly thinking that we are cracking reality because we are understanding, for example, a specific concept, it doesn't mean that this is something that is actually so. Because even if you understand very well one small isolated circle in reality, it is not everything that is out there. And for me, this is a very important concept, because when I look in the complexity of the ecosystem of reality, I understand that there are so many moving parts that it is impossible for any of us to even think about, that through the mind generating powers and principles only, it is possible to manifest and influence in reality. And that's why I often am explaining that basically in reality, we are having and doing our part, but everything that is manifesting because of the so many different aspects that are working together, we are actually allowed things to happen. And can you understand the mechanics when there are more than 8 or 9 billion people doing and generating part of the whole graphic reality together, what is actually happening? Because if you think that everything is just a simulation, you are going to get it wrong, because everything is working in a so decentralized way on the surface, and yet there are layers upon layers upon layers of centralization. And that's why reality's construct is working in a pyramidal structure where everything is actually connected in very specific ways to the center and the cornerstone of reality. And it is important because otherwise it is not possible for everything in reality to function in a coherence. And that's why when me or you are a small part of reality and we decide not to be obedient, not to be aligned, not to be in connection with what is actually part of the construct, and our small ring where we are influencing is trying to project and trying to do in reality things that are not in alignment, we are going into so-called broken stage. The Christians are calling this sin. Some other religions can call it whatever they want, but what are the religions but an explanation of reality and how maybe the creators and the designers of this mechanical interconnected reality is actually functioning. And of course, all of us are constantly thinking about the big theory of everything and how this big complexity is put together into some type of structure, and still nobody is able to understand it, to crack it, because this is part of the outside reality thinking. I know that there is an outside box thinking, but when we go into the outside reality thinking, it is much more different, because then all the things we are observing through the definition of so-called Maya, they are constantly delusioning us, because details are not revealing the general and the fundamental things. And the big problem about us as human beings is that we are not willing to accept our ignorance. We are not willing to accept that if we don't allow the raw reality to exist, we are constantly going to go into delusion into so-called ignorance, and we will never have real explanations about what is happening. Of course, then we can go into the other movement where we are oversimplifying and explaining everything with one word called God. And I personally am a believer in God and in the existence of the so-called Messiah and the principle of the anointed Savior, the so-called Jesus Christ figure. And there is a reason why this type of archetypal figure and role-playing is in a necessity to exist in reality, because reality is so fragile that it is allowing a cracking in the system, but it is also providing a definite solution that is able to hold everything in a mode of repair, in a mode of transmuting, in a mode of transforming into a more unified state and being in reality. And there are many definitions about Christ, the Christ impulse, and we go into a lot of allegorical states, also in a lot of literal states. And whenever I'm asked, what exactly do I believe? Do I believe in the allegorical, or do I believe in a fundamental, literal explanation about the exoteric part of the religions? I always say that I accept both of the things to be existing simultaneously in reality, and this is not a problem at all, because reality constructs are built by the paradoxes of the duality distinguishable experience that we are constantly observing. The mechanics are working in such a way that constantly the paradoxes are giving us non-explanations about what reality is. And now the big question is, okay, Alex, if everything is so complex, if everything is so non-understandable, how are you actually applying all of these things in your particularity of your personal daily reality experience? And this is where everything becomes very interesting, because I have always been accepting the principle of predestination, and also the principle of my own personal ability to influence, and the allowance for all of us to generate part of the reality experience based on the level upon our existence and allowance and sphere of influence. And because all of this, when I go into specific, I'm really interested not in details. When I go into focusing upon details, I very strongly understand that there is a much more bigger picture that I don't understand. But if I have and am making a specific steps towards something that long-term is going to be manifesting in reality, then I'm just walking in this direction, trusting that the processes and the mechanics of reality are there, existing and supporting my intuition and my inner feelings, that I'm not to be governed by the mind that is trying to connect the dots only. And we are conditioned to work in this way, where we have suppressed the intuition that is never connecting the dots, but is connected to the fundamentals of the reality. And basically, by compartmentalization of the knowledge, we are so strongly into specific knowledge experiences, but we are never monitoring the interdisciplinary of all this knowledge that we are understanding. And in reality, everything is working in a complex correlation between each other. And of course, then reality is giving us the storytelling principle nonstop, and it's revealing a lot of details for all of us to start experiencing and understanding, and a lot of cycles and circles of appearances of things in a way like we have the sun and moon circle, the annual circles, and so on, in order to be able to experience these distinguishings and to understand the concept of time. And if the time is only a mind concept, yes, it is not, because it is put like a mechanism into the reality principles of existence in order to tell us that reality is encoded like this type of a mechanism. And I'm going to show it once again so that all of you can see it once more. And now we can go into a totally different understanding that there is never been a simplicity in reality. And once we go into a small moving part, and once we understand that everything is moving independent of ourselves, and still, let's say we are this small ring up here, and we think that everything is running around us, and we're the most important part of the so-called reality generating mechanisms. And we, the human beings, even think that it is only us that are so conscious, and everything depends so much upon us, that we are even creating a lot of harm to this big mechanism, where there are much more conscious beings that are even more conscious than us, than are also part of the experiential part of reality. And I'm really amazed how much knowledge we have acquired and how many questions are still not answered for all of us. And then when we go into the encoding principle of reality, where we know through prediction principles that there are periods of distractions, then there are periods of creations, then there is this doom and gloom type of understanding about reality. And we can go into imprisonment part of philosophy, where we say, well, Alex, if everything is just a hive, if everything is just a very complex mechanism, my small concept of individualized consciousness reality understanding, I'm such a small part of everything, why I should be important, and what is my purpose and meaning just to be a small part, and just to be a small piece, and just to play my small unique role. Yes, if we understand that it doesn't matter how complex a mechanism is, if it's made to be interconnected and interdependable upon everything that is in existence, once we reinvent ourselves, everything is reinvented because of the way we are positioning ourselves into the reality principle. And this is why we are experiencing simultaneously several layers in reality, and also we are experiencing this multi-dimensional interactional part of reality. And that's why I have called and identified and declared in my own personal reality that we, the human beings, are allowed to be interdimensional border zone creatures, where we are experiencing simultaneously several parts of the reality layers of the existence, and we are influencing not only the material world, but we are part of the influencing of the non-material world. And when we say that we are made in the image and likeness of gods, it doesn't mean that we are the creator. It doesn't mean that we are the architect, but what it means that we have been given part of these roles to understand and to go beyond the simple things, and to start understanding the complexity of the mechanics of the reality. So basically, instead of oversimplifying, this is the tendency that we are constantly moving forward. We have one big, strong, and powerful possibility to constantly adapt and to navigate into such a complexity that the intuition that is given to us is able to precisely align into the mechanics and the mechanisms of reality. And then we are going into a situation where reality is actually supporting our existence, supporting our performance. And this is what I understand by knowing the will of the creator of all these mechanics and willingness within ourselves to enter the experience of being into the will of God, because we think that the will of God is only a specific thing that we are to experience on a daily basis, and we are constantly seeking for specific directions, like on the GPS, where we are set every step, turn left or turn right. But constantly we are receiving totally different pictures and observations from reality. And this is very interesting part of the human abilities, that we are able to defocus from the details and to move forward into understanding higher and higher layers of consciousness, and then to make the big conclusions about the working of the mechanics. And I use a lot of these principles into my personal reality. And maybe I'm going to give you one example about choices that I make that are constantly under the control of the bigger pictures of my predestination and of what my genetics and what everything in reality is little by little constructing for me. So you can imagine this as an allegory where we are part of the creation of different highways, not only in our mind, but in our reality experience. Of course, we are part of this choice, but then the way we are moving through them, the way we are intersecting, it is part of the way we are choosing in reality. But the big construct is giving us, for a reason, at least in this experience, some limitation based on the bigger mechanics of what is possible for our personal experience to happen. And instead of going into non-manifestational type of dreams, of course, all of us wants to go into the big, all of us wants to go into the impossible, but basically, instead of trying to go out of the mechanic principle, we're more and more experiencing the impossible, the more and more we are actually giving ourselves away to the predestinational part of the mechanics that is already working for us. So by going into coherence, by going into our alignment, we are entering into the multidimensional complex structure of the ecosystem of reality, and all these powers, all these energies, all this type of existence is starting to reveal before us. And of course, yes, we understand that we are small part of everything that is allowing to be revealed before us, but we are starting to engage and starting to express from the inside out our existence, and we feel the meaning and purpose them and the usefulness, because we understand that we are daily not just experiencing but daily participating of the mechanics of the reality experience. And in many areas of life I use this, and since I'm well aware that all the complexities will not be enough with one life, with thousands of life to understand, though we have decided to go into the delusion of knowing good and evil, of knowing the duality, of understanding the mechanics of the universal experience of reality, yet the knowing of God, the knowing of the behind the scene, the knowing and understanding of why everything is created the way it is, and to know the personality of the great architect, as the Masons are saying, or the one that is behind this creation, and what are the big plans and what is happening with the big prospect of the picture of 10,000 years forward or 10,000 years backwards, and to be able to understand that we are just like the leaves behind of us. We are just small part of all this experience, and this is made for a purpose. We have never been predestined to be the main player in reality, and reality have never desired to have one more than the big and the behind the scene and the beyond the reality personality. That's why in Christianity we have the Father, the one through whom all the existence have appeared. That's why we have the Holy Spirit, the one through whom everything is coming into existence. And that's why we have the third figure of the so-called by me, the universal fixer that is able to transmute and transform everything forward through from breaking towards a much more different and unified reality where everything is going to understand the mechanics and is going to play to enter into its rightful orders of the future transformational reality experience, because we are constantly not only in evolution, we are constantly into transformation, we are constantly experiencing transmutation, and we are constantly moving forward towards something new that we are going to experience beyond our earthly existence. And whenever we are going through these very moments of today, of our daily reality, and we have this broadened vision about what is before us, then all these small so-called sufferings that we so strongly want to escape, and all these small limitations from the perspective of everything that is working into the reality is becoming part of our enjoyment and moving into the specifics, because we understand that we are becoming and are part of an eternal picture that is constantly reinventing in itself into what is predestined to be. So thank you for watching. I know that everything that I am sharing is not detailed, is not specific, is not, in a sense, quite understandable, but this is made for a purpose, because my long-term goal, my long-term agenda for all of us is to start understanding that everything is into the connection between our inner being through the intuition with the divine, and not into the mind role that is playing into understanding the details, but it is not the main thing. I'm not into the mindset movement. I'm not into this movement where we think that the mind is going to overcome and that the mind is long-term through the artificial or the non-artificial or whatever intelligence we want to think about, that this is the governing force of reality. The governing force of reality is much more beyond the intelligence. I know we worship intelligence, but the creation is much more beyond intelligence and is much more complex than what we are projecting upon it to be. And that's why let us go forward into our daily reality in this week and the next weeks, and to be much more open to accept the role broaden reality. So thank you for watching. Enjoy all the complexities that are before us and all the small limitations that are part of a much more bigger picture. Bye-bye.